Hi, everyone. I'm John Boylan. I'm the president of the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce. Really excited to have you here today. So welcome and namaste. It's an honor to have you join us from both sides of the world, and actually from around the world, because we have folks not just in India and the U.S., but all around the world interested in this issue and our topic. If you're not familiar with the Dulles region, we're only 20 miles from the Washington, D.C., our capital. It's also the international airport that serves most of the DC metro area. And part of what we do here in the Dulles region is we've got almost 70% of the world's internet traffic. So actually this is probably coming to you, and your traffic for today may be coming through our internet and data centers in our lab in Fairfax counties. So I do want to thank our supporters today, especially co-host with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, IMC, Fairfax County and Loudoun County Economic Developments, Virginia Economic Development and Metropolitan Washington Airports, as well as Allwood. This wouldn't be possible without their support, and it's blood, sweat, and tears to help build these programs. The international business is so important to us. We've got a committee dedicated to that, and we run events throughout the year, actually monthly now, about trying to learn topics. I'd just like to say personally, I think India is part of the world's stability and future. And so not only are we both nations that surround the Pacific, but in fact, India has been a longtime friend and ally and is always there with us in the US when we needed help, and actually stirred a number of things. I know right now there are a number of worldwide incidents that are troubling, but the fact is we can overcome some of these relationships and regional differences through good business. And so I think what we've created and continue to create is a network. So you'll see, in fact, today, we decided to go with a meeting so we can see each other, see the diversity, and be able to chat with each other, much like if we were in one room, instead of having a webinar where it's more like watching TV. So I encourage you to leverage the chat. Feel free. I know everybody will respect it, and we have people monitoring it. For the questions throughout the day or throughout the event, feel free to post those questions on the chat for everybody so we can see those. And Juhi will be able to facilitate those. You may want to consider looking at all screens, but also look at speaker view so you can see we'll have different people speak. So it won't quite be like a webinar. And then last but not least, I just wanted to say thank you. And now I'd like to introduce, on behalf of in the spirit of cooperation and co-hosting, Rajiv Podar. He's the president of IMC, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Rajiv.
Thanks, John. Namaste, everybody. A warm welcome and greetings to all honored dignitaries, speakers, panelists, and viewers. On behalf of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in association with the Dulles Regional Chamber of Commerce, USA, I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to the online USA Trade, India Trade and Investment event on the theme New Opportunities in Life Sciences. Last month, on June 5th, Dr. Manoj Kumar Mahapatra, Minister of Commerce, Embassy of India, USA, had addressed our members on the bilateral trade and investment opportunities between our two great nations. It is from that interaction today's event has emerged. I'm thankful to Dr. Mahapatra for his unstinted support and encouragement. India is the largest producer of generic medicines globally, occupying a 20% share in global supply by volume, and also supplies 62% of the global demand for vaccines. India ranks third worldwide for production by volume and 10th by value. In fact, only today Bill Gates has said, Indian pharmaceutical industry is capable of producing COVID-19 vaccines for the entire world. India is a source of 60,000 generic brands and manufactures more than 500 APIs. The Department of Pharmaceuticals aims to make the country a hub for end-to-end drug discovery under its Pharma Vision 2020. The country is a home for more than 3,000 pharma companies with a strong network of over 10,500 manufacturing facilities. The domestic pharmaceutical market turnover reached 20.03 billion in 2019, up 9.3% from 2018, growing as penetration of health insurance and pharmacies rise. From 2018 to 2019, Indian pharmaceutical exports were worth 19.14 billion with a growth of 10.72% year on year. India holds 12% of all global manufacturing sites catering to the US. No wonder India is called the pharmacy of the world. Before I conclude, I'd like to say a few words about IMC. Set up in 1907, IMC is an apex chamber of commerce and industry in India, headquartered in Bombay. We have 3,000 direct members, and being an apex member body, we have 177 trade and industry associations through which the chamber reaches out to 400,000 businesses across the country. I wish all the participants great learning and great health. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Over to you.
I'd like to introduce Madhu Garlanka. Madhu is the CEO for Allwyn Corporation. She has folks that work in the US as well as India. More importantly for us, Madhu is also the secretary for our Dulles Regional Chamber. Just another long line of powerful women that come from India. And we thank Madhu for her service to the chamber and also for the wonderful things she's done for Allwyn. Madhu, welcome.
Thank you, John, for your kind words. We're gathered here today to hear from a diverse set of panelists with experiences and knowledge to share from very different perspectives across business and government. The topic today, as you all know, life sciences, the global pandemic, shifting geopolitical environment, much like Minister alluded to, and evolving international relations make it a particularly interesting topic of discussion today. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists today from here and across the globe. So our first panelist is Dr. Harsha Simha, the founder and CEO of Jiva Informatics in Virginia. Jiva's clinical SaaS solution reduces the travel burden for patients in clinical trials by 50% to 80% and accelerates timelines of clinical development at a reduced cost, and also improves the overall user experience for research teams and patients. We know that the whole clinical trial process can not only be very time-consuming, but obviously comes at a huge, huge cost. He's also the founder and chairman of Indo-US Rare, an organization that connects patients of Asian Indian diaspora with global clinical trials, helping both patients and sponsors in speeding up therapies. He also has a life-changing personal event in his life in 2012, which actually triggered him to turn into a social entrepreneur. We're glad to have you here, Harsha. Our next panelist is Mr. Sanjay Mariwala, Chairman and Managing Director of Omni Active Health Technologies in India. Sanjay has a stellar track record here. He has successfully started many businesses, scaled them, and also bought and sold many companies over the years. He has extensive experience raising funding. I know this will raise everybody's interest, Sanjayji, from various sources for businesses, including raising VC money, PE money, and GOI, Government of India money. He makes PE investments and mentors young entrepreneurs regularly. Welcome to the panel, Sanjayji. Our next panelist is Mr. Nimish Shah, Head of Market Access at Mylan Pharmaceuticals in the US. Nimish is a healthcare executive in government relations.
Madhu, can you advance the slide?
Thank you. Thank you, Juhi. Nimish is a healthcare executive in government supporting pharmaceutical sector, lobbying, policy, and advocacy efforts on behalf of the company with the US Congress, executive branch, and federal agencies. Since 2018, he's been in a global role supporting market access initiatives and engaging government authorities to advance portfolio of brand, generic, and over-the-counter products in India, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Japan, and Latin America. Our last of the fabulous four is Mr. Vivek Sunny Abraham. He is the Vice President of Invest India in New Delhi. He leads investor targeting, facilitation, and handholding efforts for all investors from the Americas and Europe. He has led and managed some rather iconic transactions in the Indian capital market. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to be here today. I request the audience to type their questions in the chat window so we can consolidate and go through them in the Q&A part of the session. And now let's get started. Harsha, the first question is for you. What do you see as some critical barriers for more cross-border collaboration in the life sciences industry?
Thank you for that kind introduction, Madhu, and happy to take this first question. So as a social entrepreneur focused on advancing and accelerating treatments for patients with rare diseases globally, with the Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases, we see challenges around clinical trials primarily. That's where we are focused on. Is in the US, we are talking about clinical trials as a care option, and we have a huge barrier in terms of in India, the clinical trial access, and the global disconnect that exists between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. If I can bring up my slide, okay, that's fine. I can speak to it. The 90% of all clinical trials happen in about 10% of the global population, right? And which is 10% is the pool from which most patients are recruited historically. And so I think moving forward, that is not sustainable, and patient recruitment is a huge issue in all clinical trials and clinical development. Asia, particularly the Indian subcontinent, is home for about a quarter of the world's population, and there is no easy way to access the patient population and engage them in clinical trials. Ultimately, that is the population for which the drugs are being developed, and it only makes sense to engage them during the development process. So it's one thing is easing the burden or barriers for more clinical trials to happen in India. The second is expanded access programs. So there are no guidelines for conducting expanded access for therapies that are not yet approved by the FDA in India, and having regulatory guidelines and policies that allow for expanded access, particularly in the rare genetic disease space, would be very helpful to patients of Indian origin in India, but also to enable more broader market access. Finally, the Indian government policymakers, we still do not have a national policy for rare diseases that addresses all 7,000 plus rare diseases. We do now have a definition for rare disease. Just so everybody knows, there are 7,000 to 9,000 rare diseases, and they are largely neglected, that affect over 300 million people globally. 30 million Americans and 70 million Indians are affected by these rare diseases. And so for rare disease is a public health concern, since it affects that large population as a whole, whereas individual diseases are quite rare. Collectively, these 7,000 rare diseases is a public health concern, and we still need a good public health policy around rare diseases and orphan drug development, like we have in the US, for example, the Orphan Drug Act of 1983, that provides incentives for biotech and pharma organizations to conduct research and development of the treatments for these rare diseases. Finally, I'll touch upon travel burden as a barrier, since a lot of these clinical trials can span a couple years to several years and require travel to clinical sites numerous times during that period. Having these sites mostly in the US or Europe is going to restrict the number of patients from India to be able to participate in these trials. So enabling more easy travel, even within India and outside, particularly to US and European trial sites, engaging in removing that barrier in terms of, I have heard how some biotechs focused on rare diseases had to get letters from several congressmen in the US to get a travel visa, for example, for patients from India to travel to these sites. Having a more streamlined approach and making that streamlined would really help overcoming some of those travel burden. But of course, we are looking at telemedicine and other methods to engage international patients in clinical trials as well. And that's the problem we are solving with Jiva Informatics. So I'll stop here, Madhu. There are several more, I'm sure, but my perspective is more restricted to clinical trials.
And that's very important, right? Thank you for highlighting the disproportionality of the population versus access to clinical trials. If anything, not only for rare diseases, but also for a lot of ailments. I mean, if anything, COVID-19 has highlighted that I guess everyone is the same when it comes to health issues, right?
That's right.
So thank you for trying to move the needle on that one. My next question is for Vivekji. Vivekji, what measures has the Indian government taken to make it attractive and easy for US companies to come to India? Can you please share some of those?
Absolutely, Madhu. Thank you for that. And good morning and good evening to everyone that's there on the call. Sorry for that. So, one of the things that we have done is continuously improve our ease of doing business. And over the last 5 years, we've done an unprecedented jump of more than 79 ranks in the World Bank doing business rankings. And this has been only possible because there's a very critical underlying change that has happened within the government, that there is a constant exercise to look out for criticism, look out for feedback, and then incorporate that into how we do regulation, how we enable business. I think one of the main themes of all departments and all states is to reduce compliance burden. Every process has been re-examined and is being adapted to a paperless or a faceless kind of an interaction. In fact, over the last, I would say, 6 years, we have repealed more than 1,000 laws which were redundant, which were not really helping anybody, neither us to regulate nor business to operate. Another trend that we've been seeing and we've been actively encouraging is that states are now competing with each other, and we've formalized that internal ranking mechanism where states can announce to an investor saying that they're on a particular rank on investor friendliness within the country. And apart from that, we've been actively coming out with incentive and support packages. And some of the focus sectors for us include healthcare, pharma, and apart from that, we have several more: electronics, textiles, food processing, mining, defense. Apart from that, we've been very actively working on reducing input costs. So we've been setting up ready to move in infrastructure. We've been investing in logistics, inputs like electricity, water, and other utilities. We've tried to bring it down. In fact, electricity is one of the lowest costs in the region in India. On the labor front, actually, we've been heavily investing in skilling infrastructure for a lot of our people. Labor regulations are being relaxed. In fact, we are very shortly due to launch a system where literally from the myriad of permissions that are required, we just have one license, one registration, and one return that will be required for every business that's coming into India with regards to labor. Apart from that, people who are looking for land, we used to have a perennial complaint that it was such a arduous task to search for land and good quality land along with information around the infrastructure that supports that land piece. We have digitized about 20% of the country as of now, and in the next 6 months, we are hoping to digitize another 70%, which will cover every single inch and corner of our country. And literally, a lot of you sitting at your home and office can survey what all is available and decide where to go. Seeing all of this, actually, we went one step further post COVID. So We are now reducing compliance burden even further. Insolvency and recovery processes, for example, for businesses that are not doing well or need to restructure, we are actually simplifying that even further. There's a very strict time-bound process that is there. We are investing in infrastructure even more. There's a $1.4 trillion plan that we have put out for the national infrastructure pipeline, leading to several efficiencies for businesses out there. And we've been constantly working on our IP framework. We've actually, another groundbreaking reform that we've recently launched last year is that anybody who comes and invests in India, they will be subject to only 15% tax, which is literally half of what corporate taxation is right now. And for the rest of the companies who are there and who are expanding, it will be 22% tax. So we are actually, from being one of the highest tax regions in the highest tax countries in the region, we've become certainly one of the lowest tax countries in the region. And the results sort of speak for themselves, because last year, if you look at FDI coming into India, it was about 18% growth as compared to global FDI, which actually went down by 1%. And we are looking to see and maintain that trend even this year. And these are all on the cost front, and on the revenue front, actually, what we are trying to do is that anybody who's investing in India, who's manufacturing in India, or who's adding value in India, our public procurement systems are now gearing up to support those manufacturers or adding value. It's not just Indian manufacturers, but anybody who comes in, sets up in India, and adds value in India will be considered a preferable partner for the government rather than people who are just importing into India. So, I mean, there are many more, and we could go on, and this is an entire webinar by itself. But I just thought I'll summarize some of the things that have happened recently.
Thank you, Vivekji. I think you've covered a lot of ground here: corporate tax, infrastructure support, simplification of compliance, and just simplification of the overall launch process. As a business owner, I can definitely appreciate all of these are such essential ingredients for success. And the fact that India has gone up 79 ranks overall is a huge testament to that. And I think it bodes really well for India, which I'm very happy to hear, and also for US-Indo relations. So thank you so much for sharing that. My next question is for Sanjay ji. Sanjay ji, I have some personal experience as well dealing with businesses in India and China. So I would love to hear from you, and so would the audience, I'm sure. China is both a supplier as well as a competitor to India. What impact do you see of the changing geopolitical climate between the US, India, and China, particularly as it relates to the life sciences industry?
Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because there is a continuous debate on what's going to be, how is this going to unfold, and what's going to be the outcomes that we can expect. I think there's interesting opportunities. As you know, life sciences is a knowledge economy business. We bring skills and competencies of biology, biochemistry, and chemistry into play, and I think this is an area where India clearly has a creative advantage, which we need to leverage and use effectively to score some points and move forward on establishing great relationships with businesses in North America, which is obviously the largest market in terms of life science products are concerned. Whether you look at pharmaceuticals, or whether you look at nutraceuticals, which is what I'm involved in, or whether you look at other services and support services, goods, even technical solutions, I think it's the biggest market. So building new products, cost-effective products is our forte. I think India does it well, and we need to take advantage of that today in this changing climate. I think that's certainly one significant point I would say we have an opportunity for. This is also fueled by in our experience, or at least from what we have seen, the way business has come to us, is there is an underlying desire in US businesses and people to not be entirely dependent on China, and that's one of the challenges and opportunities which we should consider looking at. And obviously, there is a desire to start looking at investing outside of China as well, and look at what can we do to perhaps look at countries like India that can gain from this advantage. I think the message I have for Indian companies is that perhaps the Indian companies have been a little insensitive to this expectation or need, and I think we need to do a lot more in being able to attract US businesses to come into India and work together. I think just a hug between Modi and Trump is not going to achieve this. I think we need to do a lot more on the ground, okay, and a lot more mindset change and thinking change is required at the industry level, in my opinion. Okay, India has the trust in a certain way from the US, but it also has some challenges in US business minds. The trust of quality and capability exists, but I think the challenges of scale and competitive, unfair competition are issues that we really have to confront and deal with effectively. We perhaps need to consider a few significant opportunities here, which is where China being a supplier also needs to be considered well, that there are scale that we need to invest in. Okay, expand the capacities and scale of things we do, including raw material manufacturing, whether it's agriculture-based raw materials or whether it's synthetic raw materials. I think we need to clearly create scale there. I think one of the things India should consider is to also make investments in US in businesses, perhaps acquire some of the US businesses, forward integrate, buy demand-generating businesses that can help fuel the trade flows between India and the US more significantly, and really get US money to be invested in India as well in these businesses, not just FDIs, but really much more of FDI needs to come into India, in my opinion. And I think this is an opportunity to do all that, and that can significantly shift the benefits or the thrust into this nexus between US and India. And I believe that's really the opportunity I visualize.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. The US dependence on China has been talked about and on the horizon for several years now, perhaps even a decade. And as you rightly said, COVID-19 also highlighted it even more.
That's right.
Opportunities and all the points that you've raised. In a nutshell, execution is key. And the opportunity is there, but execution is definitely.
That's right.
Thanks, Sanjay ji. My next question is for Mr. Nimish Shah. Nimish, how has Boylan and the industry global supply chain been impacted due to COVID-19?
Thank you, Madhu. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I think that's really a very pertinent question in these times. And obviously, these are my personal views and comments, and I want to make that clear. I think the panelists really touched upon a lot of the themes and key items here. If there is any silver lining for the industry from COVID-19, I think that there is a much greater appreciation for both the generic and the originator industry. And I'm really proud to say that the entire industry has really stepped up during this crisis. Boylan and other players have taken extraordinary measures to keep our operations and employees safe so we can ensure continuity of supply of medicines. You remember early on during the lockdowns and the rules regarding essential workers were being clarified, that I think across the board, the entire industry was able to continue manufacturing at nearly 100% capacity, and that's remarkable. The industry did take a hit with increased cost to some raw materials. I think the shutdown of commercial airlines affected some import and export of medicines and their components globally. And obviously, due to limited flights, the air freight costs have gone up. But I would say that, despite all of these headwinds, the global supply chain has held up remarkably well. as none of the markets have faced any meaningful drug shortages. And I think that's really a testament to the industry, the employees, and all the players surrounding it. And I also want to say that that the folks like Vivek Invest India with Dr. Mahapotra and others were really, really instrumental in expediting the industry's request and addressing some of these issues. And it's to their testament as well. So, as we look at this, 40% of US medicine comes from India. It provides an incredible value proposition to US consumers and tremendous savings to the healthcare system. I think as we think about scale, and this has been touched upon, it's been said that 60% of the world vaccine supply has Indian origins. India's own Serum Institute, I think, is the world's largest producer, making 1.3 billion doses of medicine. So I think any COVID-19 vaccine, for example, that's produced or developed in any part of the world will ultimately have to be scaled up in India. So, and that's going to continue for a number of years, because I think you're going to see not only the first generation of vaccines which may have 50% efficacy, and then future generations which will have sort of hopefully aiming for higher efficacy of 70-75%, as well as multiple therapies of medicines that will address various stages of the COVID illness, as well as different conditions, respiratory, neurological, et cetera. So I think scale is really certainly India's strength and leadership, and that's going to be important. If I were to briefly touch on sort of the huge implications for the life sciences sector across this will have implications across the entire value chain, from making medicine to taking medicine. So starting, let's say, for example, with R&D and portfolio strategy, there's been a lot of investment, and perhaps not enough, I think, rightly so, that was addressed by Harsha about in rare disease and so forth. Mylan has invested a tremendous amount in infectious diseases, but I think we're going to have to reassess our R&D and portfolio strategy. I think we've seen that repurposing of medicines, existing medicines, has been an essential in securing treatment options. So the industry will have to re-examine for new unmet needs. Regulatory flexibility is important in the short term, certainly to address the demand spikes in ICU-related medicines and hospital needs. But I think in the medium and long term, health systems will have to grapple with some of the challenges. For example, as mentioned, how do you address the backlog in inspections, manufacturing inspections, the delays in dossier reviews, the clinical trials and patient enrollment is really essential. And how do you do that in this virtual environment? How do you incorporate innovative use of real-world evidence as a tool in the approval process? It's not always easy to do head-to-head trials or randomized clinical trials, and those are certainly difficult in some of these situations. How to govern the shift to telemedicine, including e-prescription, and I'm here to say that telemedicine is here to stay. Pre-COVID, it was probably about 1% in the US, and I think it's around 12% or so today, and it spiked around 20%. I think there's a necessity of the reimbursement system catching up to incentivize use of new technologies. And as the rule of engagement with healthcare professional evolves and changes, replacing live events with virtual digital experiences, how do you effectively deliver product information, patient education, conduct virtual meetings with healthcare professionals that are delivering highly targeted and personalized communication, making the engagement and interaction relevant and effective. So I think these are all opportunities as well, and I think we really have to sort of adapt to some of those situations. So I kind of stop here.
Thank you, Nimish. It's refreshing to hear your encouraging and positive outlook that there have not been major disruptions as far as basic, essential, drug delivery globally. That's great. And as far as the digital transformation and its impacts in the whole care area, you do raise some very good points. We'll have to see how they play out over the coming months and years. Thank you so much. I do have some open questions that are to all panelists. Please jump in and answer and share your perspective. It has been very interesting to see how the point of view is very different depending on government, business, and so on, US, India, geographically. How do you all see the global life sciences landscape evolving over the coming few years, particularly in light of the issues that the global pandemic has surfaced? And the shifting international relations as well. This is open to all the panelists, please.
Yeah, I can start off.
Sorry, go ahead. Harsha.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to start off and curious to hear other perspectives as well. I think from clinical trials point of view, what we saw with the COVID-19 is, within a span of 3 months, we achieved as a industry, generally that takes 3 years was achieved in 3 months. For example, getting to a phase 1 data from, essentially creating the protocol and executing a complete phase 1 study. For example, Moderna Therapeutics just announced their phase 1 results yesterday. And that kind of thing usually takes a couple years or more, and that we achieved in 3 months. So I think there is a lot of changes for good that happened in the life science industry. Patients with genetic and rare diseases experience the sense of urgency every single day. And if we can make many of those changes permanent, I think that will do life science industry a lot of good. And we do hear positive comments coming from government agencies. It takes a village to make this type of achievement happen. In terms of policy needs to change very rapidly to the situation, and the industry players, which has a number of stakeholders, all need to come together and make certain, without digital transformation, this could not have been possible in terms of recruiting patients over a video conferencing call or a telephone call rather than having them visit a clinic in person, which was not even an option with the COVID-19 situation. Most hospital sites were closed for non-COVID related, non-urgent care related situations. And so I think that's very positive. I see that there will be more technology adoption, and a traditionally risk-averse industry, life science industry, would become more willing to take risks moving forward, which is my hope, as well as I think this will necessitate and foster global collaborations and exchange, as we saw between US and India as an example that was pointed out earlier, in terms of medicines exchange and helping each other type of situation. So I'll stop there with those points.
Sanjay ji, you were about to say something.
Yes, so I think that's a great point. I think digitalization is going to certainly add a lot of value to the pace at which new concepts get created and exchanged, and cross collaboration that will take place. Digitalization and this remote working has also taught us far more efficient way of getting these things done without really traveling, without physically moving from place to place. We are still able to get a hell of a lot more done, which is and at a much faster pace is really going to change the pace at which new introductions take place. I think the point I wanted to bring out was very specifically a shift that's expected from consumer angle, and I think we need to keep that in focus, which is, I think personalized medicine is going to become a very interesting piece of action. Okay, how do we actually personalize solutions for consumers is what the expectations are, and that's what consumers are looking for. And how can we actually deliver that effectively is in the digital world. Today there are books that are getting printed one at a time. So I see there's a great opportunity to figure out how to use technology to make personalized solutions work. And I think that's a very interesting place to concentrate on. That's it.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. I had a couple of other questions, but I see some very interesting questions from the audience. So I'm going to
Madhu,
choose.
do you mind if I add another point to the question that you just asked?
Yes, please, Vivek ji.
Okay. So from our perspective, I just have 2 points to make. From our perspective, I think there was a lot of actions taken by other governments, other countries, and a number of countries globally, as we observed in India, were caught out at the caught out of the supply chains when they really needed it at that particular time. So from the learnings of that particular situation, I think a lot of governments and companies are looking to build fairly resilient supply chains. And the old mantra of having extremely lean supply chains or optimizing to the nth degree has gone out of the window, because all of those who had extremely lean supply chains, sort of discovered that they couldn't operate in a COVID lockdown kind of a situation. And I think a prime example is that of Apple iPhone 12. So a lot of those companies are actually now coming to us and asking us and discussing with us on how they could probably expand in India. And we're seeing a number of states and locations competing for that investment. So that's point one. Point two is essentially there's a renewed interest. There's always some underlying interest, but there's a renewed interest in Ayurveda and yoga. And there's a lot of, and because there was that, I don't know if there's a perception challenge or what the word for that is, but a lot of companies, a lot of consumers are now coming up, at least to us. We're seeing a lot of people coming up to us and asking, how do we invest in Ayurveda? How do we invest in yoga? And that, I think, is a new phase where you're going to have sustainable medicine or traditional modes of medicine coming out, outside of COVID.
Thank you, Vivek ji. That's very helpful to know. I have a couple of questions here, like I said, from the audience. One is, I think this is actually probably more for Vivek ji and Sanjay ji. Can India and US set up a core committee or a task force dedicated to research in anticipation of pandemics by studying various microbes and also come up with awareness programs in bringing about the threats of live meat markets, which are the main sources of viral diseases getting transmitted from animals to humans?
So I think that's a very interesting idea. There's already a number of research institutions in both countries. And I'm sure there are a number of specific collaborations that's happening in this particular area as well. We could definitely explore that idea, and I would invite the views of my industry colleagues to see how useful and impactful that would be. But the critical thing is the government is very keen to identify innovative solutions, and is brought out a fund to identify and support some of these innovative solutions and bring it to market as soon as possible.
I would say if you just add maybe a little flavor to that, which is, bring in collaborative processes to get to work on, maybe bring certain US testing labs, research labs also to come and invest in India. This may be an interesting opportunity for them to then collaborate with manufacturers in India to scale and create those capabilities. I think it's a great idea to focus on something like this, whether it's in exactly the same avatar as the question is, or something else might evolve as we discuss it further and talk about it. I think that's a great, interesting area of opportunity. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, Madhu, from a research and development perspective, one cannot be fully prepared for a COVID-19 like situation. what I mean by that is, that there is a lot of investment and infrastructure that has gone into both the countries for known biological threats, but this is a new strain of a known coronavirus, and that's something we had to, the tools that were developed earlier were, of course, very useful here, but the entire workflow, starting from the specific viral strain to developing and designing vaccines and treatments and dealing with the entire pandemic, had to be customized. But I do think it would be very productive to look at how to deal with a similar pandemic in the future together.
Thank you.
Madhu, may I add one more point?
Yes.
So I think really COVID-19 really presents a unique opportunity to sort of review the strategic national stockpile, that's kind of been, and really ensure that India, America, and other partners have a reliable supply of critical medicines and be prepared as much as possible for the next public health crisis. So I think it's essential that there be more rapid and coordinated approach to medicine demand. That's really what the industry relies on, and supply planning. And I think where we have seen spottages where countries have mandated where medicines and their components can be sourced would lead to a less secure supply chain and leave the industry, I think, vulnerable to disruptions and drug shortages. The supply chain is really very geographically diverse, and various countries have different roles to play. No one country, no one company can kind of do it alone. So we've talked about, and others have mentioned, various incentives. I think it's really critical that the governments, as they do the pandemic planning, identify a list of critical medicines and strategically source those domestically where possible. They get into focus on incentives on long-term contracts, and to guarantee demand. There's talks about creating tax incentives. Vivek mentioned, that the government has put out various proposals around API investments, greenfields, brownfields, and the industry evaluating those things. And then I think you, more importantly, allow pulling of data really across borders. So we're learning from each other and harnessing to the best of our capabilities, because this is a global virus, and I think it's going to require more, not less, global cooperation and coordination.
Thank you, Nimish. Yeah, definitely that makes sense. It's been very interesting to see the level of data transparency that we have experienced with the COVID-19 outbreak. Yeah, thank you. The other question, and this is for you, Nimish. Rising cost of healthcare services is a global problem. Do you feel that health insurance sector in the US should promote affordable innovations and low-cost manufacturing in a country like India? Should there be a global IT platform for this? But I think it's even more than IT, right? So.
Yeah, I think, it's the U.S. market is a very interesting market, and I would say that for 60 to 70% of Americans, they get their health insurance through their employers. And then deciding which medicines that consumers get is largely dependent on your insurance plans, on your PBMs and such. And so I think that the generics do provide a great value proposition, as I mentioned before. And so IT technology, I think, is really essential in other parts of the health delivery. How do electronic health records communicate as we go to digitization and telemedicine? How do you uptake those technologies, I think, is really important, and having a global framework so that systems are talking to one another between different companies, different systems, state payers, federal payers, private payers, and having sort of a uniform system of engagement, I think, is really important.
Great. Thank you, Nimish. A couple more quick questions. Which region of India do you all think will most benefit from this shift from China or looking at alternative procurement to China?
So I think it's going to be a fairly uniform, uptick for all regions actually. There's obviously direct investments that are coming into most of the states, but it's also increasing economic activity across the country. So I wouldn't be able to point out one specific region. Of course, we do have specific clusters for different sectors across the country. And you would see investments for pharma, for example, going into these pharma parks or bulk drug parks, and you have these ecosystems for suppliers and vendors around them. But as such, it's very difficult to very generically say that there is a state or a group of states that will benefit more than the others.
Okay, thank you. And how would you suggest, what do you think is the best way for US companies to work with investors in India for expansion?
So again, so I think the first step is to engage with us and or anybody else within the government, and you've got very good stakeholders like IMC, and you've got the Dulles Chamber of Commerce as well. I think the first step is essentially to have a conversation and understand the market in India. And there are a number of companies out there that are looking to expand their current line of business and are looking to invest in new lines of business. So again, it's a process of consultation, it's a process of conversation, and there are any number of people to do it.
Thank you, Vivekji. It's been a very interesting dialogue across the board. Thank you all again for taking the time to be here and sharing your thoughts. Do we have Mr. Anbalagan ready, Vanita?
Yes, he's come on. Madhu, he's on.
Oh, perfect. So, Mr. Anbalagan, CEO of MIDC in Mumbai, the Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation's mission is to provide support and infrastructure. That was a mouthful and I went through it really fast. Sorry, guys and ladies. The MIDC's mission is to provide support and infrastructure to businesses. As you can imagine, infrastructure is a key factor for thriving businesses. Mr. Anbalagan has held a lot of high-profile positions. He was the collector and district magistrate in Ahmednagar, CEO of Zilla Parishad in Nandurbar, and member secretary of the Maharashtra Pollution Control Board in Mumbai, and also deputy secretary of Land Revenue Management and District Administration. Thank you, Mr. Anbalagan, for taking the time to be here today. Let me just go ahead and share your presentation. We would welcome hearing from you.
Good morning for those who have joined from US, and good evening for those who have joined from India. I'm given like just 5 minutes, so I'll rush through the very important aspects. Next slide, please. This shows where exactly the Indo-US trade in pharma sector is there. And we can see the potential in a couple of sectors, typically like bulk drug, biologicals, medicine, medical and scientific. I would say that diagnostic equipments. These are the sectors where like India is scoring better. Next, please. So this is a rough, I think there is no need to dwell upon that, but still in volume, like the country as a whole, I think we score very good as a volume, and largest vaccine produced globally. And also as far as generic drugs are concerned, the maximum like share in the world, and biopharma also share at 60% of the total revenues, and fairly a decent export and very good potential here. And there are also other areas where like countries doing good, like anti-infectives, cardiac and gastrointestinal, and also they are doing very good. And India holds 12% of the global manufacturing site, like catering to US market. And as far as castor manufacturing is concerned, it's like 33% lower than that of US. Can you please next slide, please? So Maharashtra, where we do stand, though like we say, we share like 10% of the country's geographical area, typically population also 10%, but we contribute almost close to 30 to 35% of the total country's pharmaceutical output. And we have a close to like 3,100 plus pharmaceutical manufacturing companies in major clusters of Mumbai, Thane, Raigad, Tarapur, Nasik, Aurangabad, Pune. Of late, Amravati and Nagpur is also developing, like we have a CIPLA, the biotechnological units are coming up. And leads in vaccine production, the Serum India is here. And bulk drug intermediates, you can see the export numbers. It's quite phenomenal. And state accounts for 32% of the India's biotech output, and it caters to 30% of India's patents. So it has a very strong supporting ecosystem, like a low cost, strong manufacturing base, well developed laboratory and R&D infrastructure. And parallel, it also has a well developed chemicals and petrochemical sectors. With, I would say, the JNPT port caters to almost 90% of the pharma exports. They are all channeled through Navasheva seaport in Mumbai. And of course, new opportunities have emerged in pharmaceutical sector because the state has a phenomenally high capacity common effluent treatment plants. And only state that has 4 common hazardous waste treatment plants, basically disposal sites, and highest number of USFDA approved plants in India. Next slide, please. So I don't dwell upon I would say the performance linked scheme of the government of India, and also it's also coming up with schemes for promotion of medical devices park, and also PLA scheme for both bulk drug manufacturing, and also Jiva has announced setting up of bulk drug parks in the states in the country. And state as biotechnology, medical diagnostic division, they are being given a trust sector in industrial policy, where the threshold investment level is very almost half of the investment level for other things to avail the incentive schemes. And you also get additional trust infrastructure. In a new initiative, the state has come up with a plug and play infrastructure, which very, very affordable rental work sets for pharma units and life science units. And the state has earmarked for 40,000 acres of land, with at least to begin with 5,000 acres in plug and play with a work set. And the Mahaparvana is like a master permit, would say will be getting 48 hours, you will be able to commission the production. Once you get that, the government guarantees all the pre-establishment, pre-commencement approvals. Next, please. So this is what where the incentive, for a regular incentive, if you be it an engineering, the threshold investment level is more, and for example for biotechnology, it's almost half of it. Next slide, please. This is a new proposed life science and pharmaceutical city close to Mumbai, spreading across almost 5,500 acres. It's very close to a very established pharmaceutical cluster and chemical cluster called Roha. And it's also part of the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, the last node, Digi node. It's close to that. So where almost the industrial park coming at an area of around 25,000 acres. Adjoining that, close to Redonda Creek, close to Arabian Sea. This is state-of-the-art pharma hub is being planned, where you will have a common facility of close to 70 MLD of CETP. You will have a solvent recovery plant, and also you have a separate line for, I would say, high TDS, low TDS stream. And you just come and particularly for the medium players, you will have a plug and play and common facility for the steam and added other of course steam, gas, everything is being planned there. And particularly pharmaceutical units for reactors, we also need steam in a big way. So it will be put upon a CST combined heat treatment, more like a company which a Portram sort of company does it. So it's also being planned. And this will also have an environmental clearance, composite environment clearance, where companies will not be asked to take any special environment clearance. And it's just an hour, I would say 1 hour 30 minutes from JNPT port and 45 minutes from the Dighi port. So it's very strategically located. I would request all our friends to consider the state as a very, very potential place to invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anbalagan. It is actually very impressive that business can be up and running operationally in 48 hours once the permissions are there. That is probably a first. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and privilege hearing from you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Satish Lakaraju. Satish is the Chief Commercial Officer at Agility Logistics. He heads sales and commercial aspects and has several decades of experience in logistics and supply chain. He's passionate about life sciences and patient safety and speaks in various forums worldwide on various topics, like infrastructure at airports for cargo handling, for pharmaceuticals, and also perishable exports. Welcome, Satish. We would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Madhu. Pleasure to be on this panel. I know I'm the last but one speaker on the panel, but I've got some interesting things to share about India and the India logistics sector. For a reason is that in general, the notion about the Indian logistics industry is so different from what people think, but there are 5 or 6 aspects that I would want to touch upon. One is the road aspect, because post the lockdown in March, for the last 4 months, no country would have been in such a lockdown. But for the pharma industry, the trucks were permitted to move, the reefer containers were moving, and government has done everything possible, and so has we been able to move pharma, so nothing had stopped. I know Nimesh mentioned upon an important aspect of the air freight capacity constraints that have happened at the starting of the March when all the flights stopped. But what government had done was it permitted the cargo flights to go. And what we've been able to do is that we've been using passenger aircrafts both for nearby countries, and Chicago ORD, which is the largest airport for which pharma comes in to get into Louisville. We've been doing a lot of charters as well. And so the current capacity out of India to Chicago, someone like Emirates or Qatar does around 20 flights in a week now, which is very huge in terms of capacity. So the capacity constraint has not really impacted now. It's eased up. I know the prices are still high, but the supply chains have been kept up and running. Nimesh and a lot of other people in the pharma industry don't like the price at the moment. So do we not like to really pay such high freight rates. So everything is being done, but Nimesh, for you, the good news is the prices are coming down. So just watch for that. So that's what we are working on. On the ocean freight in March, there were a lot of issues initially because the ports were closed. Anbalgan mentioned about 90% of pharma from Nava Sheva, but I would suggest that it's around 56% of the shipping bills of the country are filed from Nava Sheva. There is around 12% that is filed from the ports of Mundra. But Western region continues to be a predominant player for the pharma vertical clearly. And Mumbai undoubtedly is holding 56% of even the air freight traffic, followed by Hyderabad, which is around 10%, and Ahmedabad with another 9%, and Delhi with another 8%. So if you can actually see, the logistics industry's dependence on pharma and Western region is extremely high. And so we are seeing a great amount of change that is coming. But what is critical for all of us to understand is that I've been into the US and I know what infrastructure is there for pharma, but India is far ahead of the infrastructure as far as pharma is concerned. Every airport in India has a pharma zone, which is either GDP compliant or IATA CIV certified, which is not the case with the US airports at this point of time. The temperature excursions that happened today are not at India, but either in transit or at the US. So it's important for you all to understand that the India infrastructure is really gearing up to handle large amount of pharma, and on the ground things are getting much better. Qualified staff in terms of GDP trained, and these are the other aspects that are happening. Similarly, in terms of the ocean freight containers availability of pharma grade, there is a great amount of improvement. There is no shortage of containers that is there for someone like Nimesh to worry. Also, to track your containers, now you have online tracking tools called RCM, which is Remote Container Monitoring System, which helps you to track your containers from the time you stuff till it arrives into the US, which was not the case where it is. And the other good thing is that earlier in India, we used to never get active or passive solutions for shipping pharma for 2 to 8 or 15 to 25 or a -20. But now there are enough solutions like Vacutech, like Envirotainer, C-Safe, SkyCell, which have created Hyderabad and Mumbai as their base stations for providing sufficient equipment. And incidentally, Agility manages one of the largest Vacutech station in Hyderabad, and so also is Envirotainer there. So to give you all a comfort level, India is more than geared up to handle any amount of pharma. And if the vaccine for any reason is up and running, because we have just signed a tripartite agreement with Fuji, Dr. Reddy's and Agility to ship pharma as well. And every airport is geared up to ship pharma, be whatever it is. Charter freights are coming in. So I know Mr. Anbargal touched upon a point about a large pharma infrastructure being created in Mumbai. Hyderabad is coming up with one pharma facility of 18,000 acres as well, close to the Hyderabad airport. And the Telangana government also is putting a great amount of emphasis. So what you will see that it is one is Maharashtra, but also there are other states who are talking about logistics parks being integrated completely to support the pharma vertical. And going forward, we are expected to see more infrastructure coming up at all the airports as well. So these are the critical inputs that I wanted to share, because Madhu said I've got 10 minutes. So I'm keeping it to that short time. Otherwise, I would have probably given you all a lot of data as well. But I can share that data if anyone wants it at any point of time. Thank you, Madhu. Those are my inputs.
Thank you, Satish, for a comprehensive update. That was very insightful. Our next speaker is Carl Schultz. And Carl is the Director of Airline Business Development at the Washington Dulles Airport. And his role is primarily to support and grow new and expanded air service into the Washington capital region. Thank you, Carl, for taking the time to address the audience today.
Well, thank you for having me here. Once I can share my screen. Thank you. Basically, I've got a presentation that we'll be kind of showing for overview of what the airports are doing to keep passengers safe, as well as just a brief overview of the Washington, D.C. to India market. So let me see if I can get that pulled up. And hopefully you can see my screen. But like many businesses, we've been impacted very severely by the coronavirus. But fortunately, our employees have, if I can get it started, have taken it in stride. Our employees have been required to wear facial masks or facial coverings since May of this year. And they continue to show up every day at work to make sure that operations run smoothly, that they are protecting themselves, their coworkers, and our passengers. In addition to our employees wearing face coverings, it's mandatory for all passengers to wear face coverings in our airport. We have those that are available in our retail stores, as well as our information booths. We have a small number of them for folks that may not be able to afford masks. In addition to that, we have dedicated signage throughout our airports with CDC recommendations on how to prevent and limit the spread of coronavirus. We've also installed plexiglass shields in our ticketing areas, not only to protect our passengers, but also our frontline airline employees. These shields are extended to our gate and customer service areas as another layer of protection. We've also installed decals in our terminal as other reminders of social distancing and other measures to prevent coronavirus. We have hand sanitizing stations throughout our airport. And as supplies become available, we're adding additional ones, making sure that passengers are always never too far away from somewhere where they can sanitize their hands. One of the largest things we've done is enhance our cleaning protocols. So we want to make sure that we're getting not high touch points at the bathrooms and gate areas, but also anywhere that passengers are really kind of congregating. So you can see on the right-hand side, we have someone that's disinfecting one of our mobile lounges. Now, our mobile lounges are one of our main methods of passenger conveyance at the airport. So those are getting a thorough disinfectant right now. And then on the left-hand side, we have some of our cleaning crews going through and cleaning an airline workstation while their colleagues go through and clean the other areas. So we want to make sure we're not just hitting the high touch points, but every area that we can thoroughly. In terms of service at the airport, we never stopped operating during the virus or during the crisis, but we did see a large amount of our international operations switch from scheduled service to charter service, mainly repatriation flights. So we have some examples here of some repatriation flights that the Embassy of India conducted with Air India to get people back home. We're really thankful for their efforts, not only their efforts, but all our airline partners and all our governmental partners in offering those flights to make sure that people can get home. As airlines start to ramp back up service, as recovery starts, we want to make sure that we're maintaining our links with India. We see it as a vital market. In fact, over the last 10 years, the market has more than doubled in size. And we want to keep that trajectory going forward. Historically, Air India has served the market with 3 times a week service between Washington, D.C. and New Delhi. In addition to that, we have Emirates, which just started service again today, coming back. Etihad, Qatar, United, and Lufthansa, all connecting significant amount of passengers through their hubs to India. And as the market recovers, we want to make sure that we are working with our airline partners to strengthen those routes and add additional points and additional flights within India. So that's, in summary, that's kind of a basic overview of what we're doing to protect passengers, as well as our markets in India, an overview of our markets in India. And we want to thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see you through our airports here soon. Thank you.
Thank you for the airport update, Carl. I'll turn it over to Juhi.
Thank you, Madhu, and thank you everybody for a very insightful discussion. And I would like Bob McCollar to join me. There you are, Bob. I see you on the screen. Bob and I are going to close the session. I'm very happy to do so. I want to just say a couple of things, and just because we heard from Carl last, India just announced air bubbles between France and USA, so they're going to resume flights, I believe, starting tomorrow. So it looks very positive for travel between the two nations. I'll add that to the world of opportunities that have been introduced to us. Very quickly, I represent the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. We are a local government agency, and our singular mission is to attract and retain business investment into Fairfax County. And Bob, who's going to speak just after me, does the same for Loudoun County. And together we want to present to you Northern Virginia as the region to be. So if you're looking for international expansion, you should be looking at us. I want to thank John, Dulles Regional Chamber, for putting this massive effort together, just the number of partners, starting with IMC Chamber of Commerce. They have been absolutely fantastic to work with. And then, involving the Airports Authority, the 2 county governments, and then industry. Thank you, Madhu, for your participation. It shows that the Dulles Regional Chamber is truly committed to business, and I'm very happy to be part of this collaborative effort. So thank you, John. I want to say that similarly, Fairfax County is committed to business as well. We have been, like other jurisdictions near us, have been responding to the current situation by supporting resident business that are here, while we continue to do our outreach efforts in different markets. And specifically, my market of interest is India. And we understand the importance of having, a local presence in the market of your of your interest. In fact, that's why we're encouraging you to come here as well. And I do want to point out that in the audience today, two of my colleagues who are based in the FCDA India office have also dialed in. So Dave Malik has dialed in from Bangalore. He is the manager for our India office, and Beena Jain is based in Mumbai, and she is the business investment coordinator for us as well. So thank you both for being here, and I want the audience to know that they are your local people on the ground to help support your business expansion. While international expansion is not for everybody, I do want to say that there are some pretty good reasons for companies to think about coming to the United States. Many of them have already been stated in this forum. The US, for the 8th consecutive year, is the top market in the world, not only in life sciences, but in every industry, almost every industry. And then we heard that there is a trend towards reshoring, nearshoring, and also diversification. So it creates tremendous opportunities for both markets. We also feel that, when the US is considering reshoring, now is the time, even though there are restrictions in place, this is going to pass. Now is the time to start planning your efforts for expansion in order to avail of these new opportunities that have been created. And if you're considering being part of the reshoring process or having manufacturing operations in the United States to be closer to the market and also to provide a diversified supply chain, the time is now to start doing this planning. And what you can hope to benefit from being in the US is a highly skilled population, opportunities for smart manufacturing, very robust infrastructure. And when it comes to infrastructure and connectivity, I'm sure Bob is going to go over the tremendous data center operations that they have in Loudoun County, which do add to this as well. So my final point is, Madhu, you mentioned execution being key. And I would like to say that there is no better time than now. Both countries have a very good relationship ongoing. There are talks of free trade agreements. We want every business to avail on both sides of this opportunity. I want to make a quick mention of Ellen Meinhardt from Virginia Economic Development Partnership and her involvement as well. She is in the trade division. And so we want to encourage business both ways. I know, John, you believe very strongly in this is about business. So we want that as a result of this event that you will consider cross-border trade and investment between US and India. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Julie. And hello and namaste to everyone. As Julie mentioned, we're very strong in data centers. As many of you might not know, the internet started here in Loudoun County with AOL and WorldCom, bringing it into homes and government. And we have all this fiber throughout Northern Virginia, making us an incredibly strong IT sector. The Indian demographic here is our fastest growing demographic. They're more than 10% of the population of Loudoun County. We have many more moving here. We're especially strong in IT and pharmaceutical, but it goes across the board for Indian interest. A fun fact for many of you will be that Loudoun County is #1 in the world for data centers. There's nowhere that even comes close. We're well over 100 of them. An estimated 70% of the world's internet is Loudoun every single day. That is a statistic. And what I thought, I'll wrap this up fast, but I thought you might find it interesting that Amazon purchased about 100 acres of land here in Loudoun that is nothing but green trees and grass. And they're going to convert the entire 100 acres into data centers. It will be almost 2 million square feet of data centers alone on that piece of property, which will bring in close to $100 million a year in tax revenue. We currently have tax revenue from data centers of $400 million a year, and it's only going up. So I tell you that to tell you that it's very, very fun to be a part of this. It's attractive to a lot of Indian IT companies and pharmaceutical companies. And I'll be happy to answer more questions. I left my information in the chat column. Feel free to contact me. And thank you for attending, and I will hand it back to John Boylan.
Thank you so much, Bob and Juhi. To all the panelists and Madhu, thank you very much. And just to add on to Juhi and Bob, we just recently added Microsoft R&D and Walmart R&D. If you're looking for opportunities, it's about the people and it's about connectivity through those data centers when you look at high tech, and certainly even though pharma is about IT as well, as we talked about in our panel. So thank you so much. This is a great start. We've had an event before on India. There's so many different areas to focus on. I know the defense and aerospace is another large area, the offset ideas, the transportation, the sea power that's projected from there as well as you look at international markets. Lots more to do, but it all starts with business. We can't rely our relationships based on administrations that may change. We need to cement those relationships through our businesses and personal connectivity. And this is just the first start. Hopefully you've taken advantage of the chat room. This will be recorded and shared with everybody, but I look forward to continuing the dialogue and the relationships. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
When Cornerstones was established in 1970, its founders recognized that even in a community where people are welcomed and are welcoming, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or socioeconomic background, people could work hard and still not earn enough to support their families, that there would always be hungry people or people in crisis. Many in our community are just one unexpected life event away from living in their car or on a friend's couch or on the street. No one plans on being homeless.
My life before, I was the owner of a big pharmacy in Washington, D.C. In August of 2010, I discovered an embezzlement of several $1 million. And by the summer of 2014, I have lost everything. The house and my business. We have yet to leave the house in Great Falls. And in October 4th of 2014, we entered the Emory Riker Center. My first impression was a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. The people were very, very nice. I got a nice welcome. And we got a nice room. And my biggest surprise was the food. There was a kitchen with 4 ladies cooking fresh food 3 times a day. And my biggest pleasant surprise was my case manager. He provided a lot of love and psychological support, and he explained to me all the services that Cornerstone is providing for the homeless people.
Our comprehensive programs provide stability to people in times of crisis, resources that promote empowerment for moving forward, and hope for the future. At Cornerstones, we meet people wherever they are, without judgment.
Now I have my home. My daughter, she's in school, she's very good. She's gonna go university. My husband, good job working. Now I'm thinking to go to university, to finish my university, and to find good job after that.
Providing stability is only the first step. Where Cornerstones is different from other organizations is in providing the gift of time and resources that continue after the immediate crisis has passed. Cornerstones empowers people to take the next step in what is often a longer journey to well-being through their own hard work and the tenacious support of Cornerstone staff, volunteers, and partners. And we see the difference that makes every day.
I become a citizen and I enjoy the class, and it's helped me also. My English is become better and I speak better now, and I understand also people when they talking. And after that, I interested and I help her in the class. When I become citizen, I still come every week and help in the class.
When we got the place, the Cornerstone has been extremely supportive to us. They furnished the house because I didn't have anything left. New beds, tons of food, and any supply you can imagine. My case manager came here, brought cleaning things, sheets and clothes and food. So the ladies came here, they fixed everything for us, so it was an easy and very pleasant transition from the shelter to this place. And I'm very appreciative.
These individuals can imagine a future they thought out of reach and can begin to make goals for a better future. Goals we all share for ourselves and for our children. Goals that are possible with the support and partnership that you provide.
Immediately when we moved to the community, we knew that Cornerstones was going to be an excellent partner and build a strong relationship with us. We've been very involved with the organization, whether it's volunteering at the Embry-Rucker shelter, participating in the Help to Homeless walks, and just frankly helping to secure affordable housing for those individuals living in our community. It's such a critical need to build a better Reston.
Cornerstones is proud of the role we play as a participant, convener, interconnector, and advocate, bringing people and sectors together to solve some of our region's most challenging problems. Our readiness program for job seekers has been adopted countywide, and with our business leaders, we're defining the skill sets needed for our current and future workforce. With Reston's Opportunity Neighborhood Initiative, Cornerstones is working along with our partners to see that all children thrive in a healthy start in life and are prepared to excel in school and career. And true to Cornerstone's founders, we believe that our job is to end homelessness, not just manage it, by developing housing that is affordable for people over their entire lifetime. Together with our partners, we have reduced homelessness in Fairfax County by 47%. We remain firmly rooted in the Reston community goals handed down by its founder. We apply the value that all may live, work, play, and serve in the many areas which Cornerstones operates today.
Cornerstone, it's a very, very important organization. Based on my experience, is providing a tremendous help to needy people. And I cannot express in words how appreciative I am for what Cornerstone has provided for me and my son. And most of all is, besides again all the material things we get, is the love and the attention we get from the case management.
It's like I'm become like, now I'm doing things, I'm happy. Yeah.